All right, sorry, buddy. Sorry for my internet connection. It's once again being not really good right now. I'm so sorry about that. My internet connection has some issue again for some reason. So sorry about that. I finally get that fixed. So I'm sorry about a little bit late. Thank you for you guys being patient right here. Sorry about that. Okay, I guess we'll just go ahead and get started for today. So we'll just go ahead and get started. And then let me go ahead and share what we're going to go ahead and implement today. So go ahead and implement another project again. So sorry about that for my internet connection issue. So I will be responding just a little bit. Let me get everything set up first. Sorry about that. Thank you for you guys being patient right here. Okay. All right. So here is what we'll go ahead and try to implement today. You're welcome. Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi keep having some issues. Let's see. All right, so here is what we're going to try to implement. So we're going to use NASA's API, and then you can see we got an image here, and then this is basically a service that NASA provide. Whoops, a service that NASA provide. It's called astronomy of a. It's called astronomy picture of a day, API APOD, and then we're going to go ahead and whoops.
What is API?
Yeah, I will explain that just a little bit. So it's a service. So let me actually explain API like right now. So what it is an API? That's so as you get into more programming, especially web programming in general, what we usually find out is that we will go ahead, we'll use a lot of external services. So if you're using Python, all the others, you probably at least use one external module before, or if you're using other programming language, you probably use at least some other modules. This is called an API. So an API, in a sense, is basically a user. We don't have to write the code for ourselves. An external service where third party provided something, some data that we can use. And then this is called API, where application programming interface. And then we can use this the NASA's API to generate a new image of a day, a new astronomy picture of a day. So this is an image that we can see, and then you can see there's a picture and there's a paragraph of description. So this is what are we going to try to implement. But before that, I will hope I will go ahead and search up something real quick. Apple NASA. Yeah. So if you guys possibly can, let's see. Please go to this this website if you can. It's api.nasa.gov, I think. api.nasa.gov, and then this is going to give you an. So if you go here, and then if you possibly can, fill out this form, and then NASA will email you an API key that you can use, and then we're going to use this API. So if possible, please fill out this form here to generate an API key, and then we can go ahead. So if you generate an API key, and then we can go ahead, so we can make much more requests instead of like it's by default using demo key, which is not going to use like lots of requests. But yeah, if possible, I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, so you guys can please go ahead and sign up here. If possible, you guys please click on this form and then submit this form, and then you should be see email from your to your inbox, and then this should contain your API key. And then Sahel. So sorry, so Monday we basically talk about JavaScript, and then we're going to build onto we'll finish talking JavaScript and how we can use JavaScript within our website. And then today we're going to build onto these ideas, and then we're going to use API using a service that's NASA provided to us, and then to generate a new astronomy picture for a day.
What is the application URL?
Skip that. You don't have to fill that out. It's optional, I think. Yeah, it's optional. Yeah, you don't have to fill that out. Okay, yeah, looks good, Jeffrey. That should be your key. And so after generate the key, we'll go ahead and take a look. How can we using that key to generate data, to use data? So if you've finished if you cannot generate key, please let me know. I will wait for about 2 minutes here, and then we can go ahead and move on. Yeah. So you basically should have a really long string of characters, and then which you can use. And if somebody can't, please let me know. I will let you guys to use my API key. If you guys can't, please let me know if Rickis can generate API keys or not. I'm not sure they work on China if you are in China. What is it? The API key, so you can, if you don't have an API key, I think it's fine, but still I recommend you to have an API key because we can use requests. So that's what we use requests as a parameter. We'll talk all about what its API key for in just a little bit. But basically, we can use this to get more requests so we can access data from that server. Do we sign up? Yes, make sure you fill out this form, generate an API key form, if that would sign up you're talking about. That's a form which you fill out. Let's see. Yeah. All right, so for the people who just come back, make sure you go to api.nasa.gov, and then on generate API key, go ahead, click on generate. Yeah, I will explain that in detail in a little bit. What is API key for? This URL. Clickable again. It's api.nasa.gov. Oh, Zoom is behaving badly today. Okay, there we go. Yeah. I cannot paste a message either way for some reason. Yes, api.nasa.gov. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is what we'll try to implement. I'm going to assume everybody can get an API key. And then this is what we're going to try to implement. And then you can see we got some different font. We're going to talk about some font today as well. And then can click on a calendar. And then if we choose a different date, you can see we got a different image and different paragraph of description. So that's basically what we're going to implement. And now let's go ahead and get started. We're creating a new repository here. New repo. And we're going to create an HTML, CSS, and JS. All All right, so okay, so but before we really get started to implement this web application, we need to know how do we access a data. So first is I want you guys to have the ability to actually read the documentation. So we will go ahead, if possible, you guys please go to this api.nasa.gov again, and then here scroll down to browse API section, and in here click on APOD. That's the API we're going to use today. And then you can see this is what will happen. So this is some description of what this API is for, astronomy picture of the day. And you can see this is the example image that's going to generate. And this is HTTP request. So does anyone heard of HTTP or HTTP? Does anyone heard of HTTP before? Or does anyone want to guess what does HTTP mean? Okay, so what is HTTP? Well, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is basically how could you access a web page? Because if you pay attention in here, a web page is either HTTPS or in this case, and what sometimes didn't display, but it's HTTP. So this is a prefix for a website. It's a prefix for a website. But what does it mean for HTTP request? Well, there's different requests, turns out, that we could make. For example, we could make a GET request. GET request simply just mean we could get something from the server. We want to get something from the server. And we also have a POST request. Unlike GET request, POST request is security protocol. So everything that you send via GET is visible using URL. But it's visible using URL. But when you're sending using POST, your information is securely hidden and then secretly and encryptedly sending to the server that you're requesting to, and then sending to. So this is two common HTTP requests, GET and POST. POST basically is a secure version of GET. GET is just a way, just a normal way to get something, to get a data from an external server. And as you can see, for this API, we're going to use GET request. And where do we get to? We want to get this URL, which is api.nasa.gov/planetary/apod. And then you can see there are some query parameter we can pass in. So what is that query parameter? Well, let's do a demo here. So here is the base URL that's going to send in the request to, and then we could add some custom parameter by typing question mark. And in here we can say date. And then we can write date in this format, year, month, day. And then, for example, if you want to get the astronomy picture for today, which is 2020, July 22, so 2020, 0722, this is how we can make a GET request. Basically, just literally typing here the browser. Whoops, let's see. All right. Sometimes make that mistake. Whoops. I don't know. Sometimes it does show some weird error for some reason. But okay, sometimes it shows some weird error, but it should work when we're using JavaScript. But basically, we can add this to the end of our URL, and then there are the additional information that we can send to the server. And then, for example, we can send like a date. As you can see here, we can click on this calendar and choose different date we want, and then click this button. It's going to generate a new. It's going to get the new image. and then new image, and then we can have HD and API key. So API key by default is demo key, but please, if you possible, please get API key that you sign up from the form, and then we can go ahead, we can get more requests. And now let's talk about what is an API key. Well, what if I access this website for like a lot of time? So basically, it's for security reason to have an API key in a way that we don't want anonymous requests. So we don't want the request that we don't know where it's come from, because this demo key is public. Like, so for example, in my IP address, I believe when I access this URL within 60 times within an hour, it's going to automatically block the request from this API address. This is basically for security issue. For security issue, API key, and then it's a way to authenticate a user. In a later, we'll also take a look another kind of API. It's called OAuth, specifically for authentication, but we'll be doing that in just the week after. So this is a point for API key. Basically, provide some information that the server be able to identify who you are, thus going to provide you more requests per an hour. All right, so now if we go, I think if I click this link, it should work. So if we go ahead and click on here, you can see this is the API key generate. This is the data. And then you can see we got a copyright, date, explanation. We got an image. We got a media type, service version. We don't have to care about that. We got a title, and we got our URL as well. So that's what the data going to be. And this data is something similar. So does anyone think, does anyone see this data is a little bit similar to something we learned last time? Does anyone realize what this kind of format is similar to? Hint is something related to JavaScript. Does anyone see how this is related to JavaScript? It's a kind of data structure. So it's probably a string, a number, or an array or an object. So does anyone see this the similar for this data? So what so how this data is similar to the data structure we learned on JavaScript? Okay, so this is actually an object in JavaScript. As so for example, it starts with curly braces, and we got a property, different properties, and correspond to each different values. For example, we got a URL, we got a title, and we got a description. So basically, what's happening here is this data is a JavaScript object, but sometimes that so this kind of data is especially useful when we're using API because most modern language can parse JavaScript object really easily. So JavaScript object itself actually become a new sort of like a markup language. It's called JSON, stand for JavaScript Object Notation. Basically, this is a way that you can parse that. You use JSON, we could parse data into its respective object. So in JavaScript, we could pass JSON to object, but in Python, we could parse JSON into a dictionary.
I'm in class.
So that's basically what is JSON. So I know it's just like less than 30 minutes, but we already talked a lot of stuff that we need to understand. First, we briefly talk about what is an API, an application programming interface. Basically, is we can we grab other people's data to ourselves, and then we can use data somewhere. And then we talk about API key, restrict, authenticate for security purposes. And we also talk about JSON, JavaScript object notation. How can we parse data how can we parse our data, basically. using API. Just JSON is really common when we're dealing with API. All right. So, but now what we turn to look is we're going to take a look at how can we get this in JavaScript. So keep in mind that we cannot use a browser. Everything is done in JavaScript. So every cool thing is done in JavaScript. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look how can we actually fetch data in JavaScript. Fetch data in JavaScript. So this is so for example, this is a data that we want. Basically, that's a data, and then here's where you're going to put your API key in. So get your API key, and in here we're going to define. It's actually define a constant variable. We're going to call this API key, and then basically in here is you're going to put your API key here, and then later we're going to reference to this variable. So just in case your API key get changed, this is where you will put, we'll go ahead and store that in a variable. And then, so we just need to change it in one place if it's absolutely necessary. So API key.
Can you send the link of the REPL in chat?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. See. Oh God, it still doesn't work. Let's see. Can you? I don't really know. Okay, I think that should work. This is the REPL, but the finished version, I think, located at here. This should be the finished version. Yeah. All right. So, so you put your API key here, and then once you finish that step, what we can do now is go ahead and we need to go ahead and create a base URL. So what is a base URL? A base URL is where are we going to make the request to? Let's see. Yeah, Ethan, that's exactly how it's look like. And then this is a base URL where we're going to make the request to. And then in here we can put it like this. But instead of demo key, we can delete that part and can go ahead and concatenate string together at API key here. You're probably thinking, how suppose I add two string together? It's not numbers. I know 1 + 1 = 2, but I don't know what is A plus B. Well, in JavaScript's mind, what is A plus B? A plus B is AB. So basically, it adds two strings together. All right. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to use demo key here because I don't want to generate a new API key. If you guys cannot generate a new API key, it's fine. Just use demo key. It's all good. All right. But now here's a problem. How could we actually get the data that is from the server? How could we actually get the data? Because for now, what we've been done is put our API key to here and our base URL. But how can we make a request to JavaScript? So I wouldn't expect anyone to know this, but does anyone heard of fetch before in JavaScript? Does anyone heard of fetch before in JavaScript? Okay, so it's fine. So what is fetch is, it sounds pretty literal. What's that mean? Is fetch is basically how we can fetch a data from an external server. So basically, what we can do is we can type fetch, and here you can see we can go ahead and put what do we want here? What's the URL here basically? And then what's the URL? Well, we define it above. It's called base URL. right? It's got base URL. That's what we defined it to. Actually, let me do it here. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, never mind. I'm just going to do it on the left hand. So we're basically going to go ahead and type fetch and then base URL. But then here's a little bit weird syntax. We're going to type dot then. So what does dot then do? Well, this is a little bit weird because fetch is a function, but if we go ahead and take a look, let's go ahead and say console.log type of fetch. I'm not sure what that show, but let's go ahead and run this. You can see it's an object. It's an object, but what's actually it is being is a promise. So I'm not going to explain this really in depth because it's going to make you guys even more confusing. So I'm not going to explain this in depth, but well, basically fetch return is an object, and this object is called promise.
But I got promise though.
You got promise on the screen?
Yeah.
After you print type of? Yeah, I don't know. It probably because of browser version with the JavaScript version on your browser.
I got promise and 2 curly braces.
Yeah, that's exactly what I tried looking for, but I'm not sure whether it's pronounced object or promise because everything is an object in JavaScript, but promise is where more specifically it is. So it's a promise. And what is a promise does is it's a promise object. So then we can access information when seeing this. And then to be more specific, it's a response object. So it is a promise, but it's also a response object. So response, so then in here, so let's first deal with a promise first. So how can we actually access a promise data? Because that's what we want to. Our data, this JSON data, is being stored in here somewhere. So to access it, we can type dot then. Basically, this is what happened. If we fetch it successfully, then we're going to go ahead and do this dot then. And in here, what we're going to say is something like this. Response is going to take a variable called response, a parameter called response for its function. And then I use a equal sign and a greater than sign. This is called arrow function. Basically, it's a shorthand notation for creating function, because to create a function in JavaScript, what we need to do is we need to define function, enter function name. And in this case, I do need a response. And then I can start typing here. So I could type something inside of it, something inside. So console, let's just type something, blah, blah, blah. And then that is really long. And then if sometimes you just want to have one line function, we can do in arrow function. So basically dot then is going to have a callback function. So basically we need to put a function in this as an argument, and we're going to take a parameter called response. And then we can type an equal sign and a greater than sign. Actually, we don't want curly braces here. We don't want curly braces here because it's just a single line. So if it's only a single line and a single parameter, we don't need to add additional parenthesis here. And then we can just type a one line declaration here. So what do we want to type here? Well, it's a JSON data. So now let's try to go ahead and try to convert this response object into an object that is readable to us. So we can actually do something like this, response.json. What this going to do is it's going to turn this response promise object into a JSON object, which is just a normal object in JavaScript or a dictionary. So something like this. I don't know why it's giving me an error, but something like this. Oh, it's not defined. Something like this, basically. So we can go ahead and parse the data. But then we didn't finish yet. So if we run this again, you can see we don't see anything print out because we need to console.log. But we cannot console.log response, because if you try that, you can see response is not defined because there is an issue with scope. So what scope is for a function, if you define a variable in here, so our variable just defined as let's just, for example, using these two variables we defined, API key and base URL. As you can see, these two is global variable because they defined in global scope. So wherever I'm at, I can use these two. I can use these two functions, but these two variable. But if I go ahead and define something a little bit, something like function. Let me just do it in JavaScript console here. So if I define something like var hi equals hi, and then here if I try to type function hello, and then here I want to say console.log hi, you can see it didn't really get console.log, but you can see we don't get any error. That means hi is defined. But if we go and do something like this, function hello, oh, we didn't call this function yet. So if you go and call this function, we can see hi get print out on our console here. But what if we want to do? But what if I define a variable within a function? So I can say hello world, and in here I'm just going to define a different variable, and let's just call this var hello world, and just call var hi equals to, let's call hello, I'll call something different. Hi, let's just call this how are you, and then give how are you to this, and then close this. But if we go ahead and call this function first, oops, I typed it wrong. If we go ahead and call this function, you can see nothing get printed out, but this variable get defined. But if I type how are you here, what you can see is how are you is not defined, despite I defined it in the function, because this is a local variable. I can only use it within this function. So if I try to say something like console.log how are you within this function, oops, console.log how are you, and then if I try to say hello world, and then you can see how are you get printed out. But I can, so basically if a variable is defined within a function, it's only visible within a function. You can only use this within this function. You cannot use it outside of a function. However, if we define a variable outside of a function, basically in the global scope, like these two variables are, we can use it anywhere we want, basically. So that's about a little bit about scope. I'm sorry for crunching so many things together. And then now what we can do in here is basically type .then. And then we can say something. And then in here, we're going to add another .then. So basically .then means happen if this the step before it successfully happened. So basically if we successfully fetch the information, then first we want to change to JSON. Then what we want to do is we will take in a different variable. Let's call this data. And in here, we're going to type something similar. So still using arrow function, but this time it's taking data as a variable, as a parameter. Sorry. And then if we go and say data, and then basically the data will be the information in a JSON object, or in the just a regular object in JavaScript. So now if you run again, as you can see in the console right here, we can see all the information from this browser, from this web page has been sent to our browser, or not our browser, to our JavaScript program. And then later we can use this. All right, so sorry for covering so many things at once, but does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, let's see. Sorry, yeah, I should go a little bit slower. Sorry about that, keep talking a little bit fast. Thank you for letting me know. Manipulate and access HTTP pipeline. Yeah, that's exactly what is promised, I think. Yes. Is that HTTP? Okay, well, can you copy what you wrote on the right into chat? Yeah, I think chat is not working now. So on the right.
I got a syntax error.
Oh, on the right. Okay, not on the left. Okay. Well, now everything's gone. So basically, just explain how variable works, different scope. So if we say something like var high equals high, and then we can use it in like different things. So like console.log. But if we go out and create a variable within a function, we cannot use it outside of that given function. That's a little bit about scope. All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so this is about how can we fetch a data. And actually now what we can use is, if you take a look closely, it's actually a JavaScript object. That's what we can use basically. So now what we can do is we can now using bracket notation to get a property, basically to get a property. So in here, what if I want to first and foremost, I probably want to get the URL. I probably want to get the URL, so I know what to display to a user. So in here, I can just type data bracket URL. And then here, basically, we're getting recall this is a way to reference a property in JavaScript object, and then we're using data. So data is the JavaScript object, and then we'll try to access a property URL. And then if you go and try to do this, and then you can see we got this image shows up here, this URL, and then this URL should be today's APOD API picture. Okay. So this is how we can use fetch. I briefly explained fetch. Obviously, there's a lot of things that goes to promise. And then what if there is an error within the promise that we have, then we can actually using catch. Basically, this just says, what if something happens? What if some error happens? Then we can just say console.log error. But instead of .then, we use .catch instead for catching an error. All right. So
I got a syntax error for somehow.
I'm sorry?
I got a syntax error. It said.
Did you copy my Zoom thing into your Replit? Because you probably need to change the quotation marks. I don't know why you get syntax error. Probably we can do that in about 5 minutes when we have a break.
Type error.
It's a type error. Okay.
I also got a syntax error.
That's weird. Did you guys add that catch? Probably I shouldn't add there. It will still work for me.
Same here. I just syntax error.
Okay, let me take a look. Okay, it's not .then, it's .then. It's not It's dot THEN, not THAN. It's fine, Kessler. Thanks for coming anyway. I'm actually a little bit as well today. It's not THAN, it's THEN. It's happening after. That's what we're using then word. Basically happen.
Well, I didn't get any like an error this time, but it didn't show like the HTTPS like API there. So
Works now.
Okay, so let's try to debug these errors because they're kind of important. So can anyone just repeat their questions?
So basically, I got it didn't say any error now. Like I don't have like the HTTPS like apon.nasa.gov / some like.
Okay, so that's because the code you sent me shows responses. If you take a look closely, you can see I use data instead. I use data instead of the variable. So I'm not sure, could you do response here as well? I'm not sure because we define a variable here. I'm not sure the scope allow us, but basically make sure whatever is here is matching here. So you cannot use like response here, but you're using data because then it's probably like undefined or something. Vera, I see your hands raised up in just a minute ago. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, can you copy your code into chat because for some reason I didn't receive that.
Okay, I hope I didn't sign to private again.
Yeah, you privately texted it to me again.
Sorry about that.
I think.
Also,
Well, I think you already texted it to everyone.
Okay, I just send again.
Also, if you're late, everything in the chat you've already done does not
Yeah, there's
pop up
not.
to me because it only shows up the chat that I've seen recently.
Yeah, so that's kind of a bug, but I don't know, is that good or bad? But here is the Replit link if you want to. So basically, we just explain what is an API. Basically, it's an application programming interface, and then this is where we can access a third party's data into our own JavaScript program.
I got it undefined.
Undefined. Are you sure that data is matching here? So like you're using response, data, because it's going to show response if you like type response here, but data here. Yeah, Vera, do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. Let's see. Your code looks correct. Oh, okay, well, okay, so Ethan, you're not going to use API key because my key is like this. That's the base URL. You're not going to add like a demo key, but then with your API key still, because demo key is what I use. But if you have an API key, just remove that part. So that should be your base URL. It's not like demo key there. So you can set it to privately to you. And then here is how the code should look like. Const base underscore URL equals to a string of the NASA thing and plus API key. There shouldn't be demo key anywhere because demo.
It.
What?
It works.
It works now?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right, so I think we're going to take a break for now for 10 minutes. So if you guys want to drink water, we'll go bathroom, feel free to do that.
Yay.
Then we'll go ahead, come back, and then work on how can we actually display the data.
Can we chat?
All right, so welcome back. Hope everyone is back. I just signed up using my email address. In case anyone cannot use it, this is the API key that I used. In case anybody cannot find their own, but if you have, please use your own. Otherwise, instead of demo key, feel free to use this one because we can use more requests using this. All right. So now what we're going to talk about is actually how to go ahead and use the data that we parse and into a beautiful page, maybe not beautiful, but simple page that we created. So we're going to work on two things. We're going to first work on HTML first, so the hypertext markup language, and then we're going to work on CSS, but then last we're going to incorporate JavaScript. I'm not sure can we get everything done today. If we can't, we'll just try to finish everything up in Monday, but we'll try to finish everything today. All right, so let's just call this a pod, and then I want this. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. So first thing first is let's see. First thing first is I will want to create an H1 tag. Just a sec. Let's see. All right, so the first thing first is I would like to create an H1 tag. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, just please unmute your mic and talk. I'm not sure can I keep on the chat. So if I didn't respond to your questions, feel free just to unmute your mic and talk. All right, so here. I'm sorry, Kessler. Could you repeat your question? Could you say something? Yeah.
If you want to temporarily unmute, you can press the space bar.
Okay. All right, sounds great. Thanks for letting us know. All right, so now let's get back to our H1 tag. So in here, we're going to go ahead and add a class. Recall class is a way to identify multiple HTML elements, so we can do styling or even using JavaScript to manipulate property with it. And for this, we're just going to say center text. And here we're going to say NASA's APOD API. NASA's APOD API. And then we are going to have this. We're going to have an H3. We're going to have a center text as well. So center text is we're going to define this separate style sheet here. And then here, I will go ahead and give an ID as well. The ID is going to be date. ID is going to be date, but the content is going to be empty because we want to do something with it in JavaScript. And then now let's go ahead and create a div. So which is a divisor basically, but is where we can group two elements together. And then here we can say input type is date. And then basically this is just going to display that little tiny calendar that we can choose from. And then ID is date input. And let's see, and then the minimum value. So in this case, you can actually specify a min for minimum value. So what should be the minimum value or the oldest date that a user can choose in this case? Well, it turns out that we do have a minimum value applicable here, and it is 1995. So it must exactly in this format, 1995 on June 16. This is a minimum date. That's what we have to do. So the reason we use this specific date is because This is when we actually they first publish their APOD API, and then we can go ahead and mess with this. So before this day, it's just going to give you some error for not defined because we don't have the data for them. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and send the code to here. All right, so now if we go ahead and view this, let's see. So now if we go ahead and view this, you can see we got something like this. Well, and then you can see if I click on this, we got, I'm not sure can you guys see this, but we got a calendar here. You guys cannot see it, try to press on it. And probably you guys can see it in a little bit. Got a tiny calendar there. All right, so that's it is about our calendar. And then let's go ahead and create a button. And then here, we're just going to go ahead and say button type is button. So basically, as you take a look form in the last in the class on Monday, we can see that a button doesn't, if we say input type equals submit, it's actually submit a form to an external server and then refresh the form immediately for security purposes. However, if we go as this button, then basically it's not going to submit, and then we can use JavaScript to see when the button get clicked. All right, so in here, what we could say, whoops, I make this bigger. And then here we can give an ID button. And here we want to give an onClick attribute. So basically what should happen when it get clicked, and then we can put some JavaScript function here. But in this case, what we're going to try to use is a function that's going to define later called custom APOD. Custom APOD is a function that we're going to use. And to finish this off, we're going to have the text of a button going to be check APOD. Check APOD. And then we're going to go give this class a centered text as well. Okay. So now, if we take a look, you can see we got a button. We got h1 tag. We don't have a visible h3 tag because we don't have put any text in it. We have a calendar and we have a button as well. All right, so now let's go ahead and finish this HTML off with some other elements. First, we're going to create a line break. Then here, we're going to create a div. An ID, we're just call this media. So basically it turns out that APOD sometimes is going to return us a YouTube URL instead of image. So we'll take a look how can we handle that as well. So that's why we're going to create a div called media. And I'm not sure, are we going to be able to get time to implement these? But we can say title for bold tag, I for author. You can see all these are empty because you're gonna add text later to using JavaScript. And P is explanation. All right. So that is all HTML. Basically, just do a quick recap. We have a standard header tag, and then h1 tag, h3 tag, and they got a script. We got some center text with something look like a form, but not really because we don't have a form tag wrapper around it. And then we have we have media, title, author, and explanation. And let me send this to the chat really quick. All right. Okay, so that's all we're going to do in HTML. It's pretty simple. And then if you look oops, not this one. This is the final result. And then if you take a look at this one, we can see nothing really different.
How come like every time you click like the calendar thing, the month always kind of gets highlighted? At least that's for my.
Could you repeat your question? I cannot hear you. You're muted.
So basically, when we press the calendar on mine, the month like automatically gets highlighted for some reason. Like
Automatically what?
it gets highlighted blue. Like.
Oh,
like,
okay. Yeah. The reason it's automatic highlight in blue because probably can see something like this. It's because it's some built-in syntax. So by default, it's automatically going to do something like this. But if you don't like it, you can disable it using CSS.
So is it sort of like because there are 12 months in the year, so there are 2 M's?
Yeah. No. That's not what it means. It's that how do you explain like whether it's like y for years? There's not only 4 years, right? It means a digit. It means a digit. So how should you express July? Should you type 6? 7 or 07? You should type 07 in this case, basically. All right. Any other more questions? These are really good questions. It's not exactly this way. You need to put year in the front, but it's automatically going to format for you in a calendar. So no worries on that. All right, so now let's go ahead and start go ahead and add some CSS file. Go add some CSS file. So first thing first is you can see this font. This is the final result. As you can see, the font is really different. Right, the font is different. And in fact, this is not any built-in font that you can find. So what you can do to find additional font to add to your CSS, if you want to, you'll go to fonts.google.com. And you can go there, fonts.google.com. And then if you're in China, obviously you cannot use it. But in here, if the web page is going to get loaded, you can see there is many different fonts that we can choose. For example, common one is Roboto, Molish, Red Rose, OpenSense. But in this case, you're actually going to use Space Mono. So if you go and search Space Mono, and you can see we're going to use this kind of font. And then let's see. And then we're actually going to use, let's see. So we're actually going to choose some different styles. So we're going to use bold 700. So we're going to select bold 700. And then in here, click on embed. And then we're going to use import in CSS. So basically copy this. And I was typing in the chat as well, so don't worry about that. And then in here, in the style.css, I could just put it at the top. So I can import this font, and then later I can use this font. And then let me send this into the chat. So here is what you should add to your CSS. Basically, this is a style sheet that says how should it behave. All right, so after we add this custom font to our CSS, now what should we do? Well, since we add this, what we need to do now is actually apply this. Apply to actually start to apply this font to our H1 to our center text actually. So we want to all center text be have this kind of font. Oops. So we want to all the text that is in the class center text have the font have a font like have a space mono font. And then if we can wait to it to reload.
How does Replicate get all these weird names for the the files?
It's probably they probably have a word list that's contain all the word they have, and all the possible words. And then they just use a random generator, basically choose a random word from an array, probably you can imagine, and then just like choose 3 or 4 word, and then randomly, and then just create this weird replit style name. But that we're actually going to take a look at in one of our project. When we do in one of our project random, probably going to do something like that as well. All right, so now in here, we're going to say dot center text. That's what we'll do first. Recall I have a class called dot center text. And then dot just refers to we're selecting a class. And then since it's center text, well, obviously it must be centered. And then font family. Obviously, I want to use mono, space mono, the font that I just imported. But in case space mono is not supported because it didn't import it successfully or whatever reason, by default, I just use monospace instead, monospace. So now if you go ahead and take a look, you can see now they're centered and they're using this different font. You can see this is space mono now. All right, so now let's go ahead and changing the background first. So in here, we're going to use the universal selector or select everything. And in here, we're going to say background color. And in this case, the background color is going to be a really specific hex value, which is a way you can uniquely distinctly define a color. And here's the background color. So if you're going to take a look, you can see it's a little bit grayish basically. Okay. And then in here, we'll say background color is this grayish color. But since now you can see the text a little bit not readable, so actually turn all the text into white. So you can do something like this. Color is white. And if you take a look, now I can see these texts are all displayed in white, so the user can see them more clearly. All right, so that's about so that is about the background and some font and some color. Now let's go ahead. Can you, let's see, code, what is the APOD? APOD stands for Astronomy Picture of the Day. Well, I create the website that you see here, but I didn't create the data. The NASA created the data, or they get the data. Okay. When do you show the homework for last time? Oh yeah. Okay, I guess I will send an email to you guys later about the homework. Code, yeah, code. I'm probably not gonna have a chance to repeatedly paste code. So if you can just go to this URL, that will be awesome. Here's the CSS code. All right, so this is a center text, and we change the color to white. And now let's go ahead and we are actually going to go ahead and center the image as well, if possible. So center the image, you have the meta type is image, which usually it is. And then here we're just going to use a tag selector, img for image. And then we're going to set something, we're going to set a bunch of property. So display is block. Margin left is auto determined. I believe margin right is also auto determined. and width is 50%. I think. I'm not sure. Do we use that though? Actually, no, we're not gonna use this. Sorry about that. Because I didn't refactor my code pretty well. But here, just gonna say hashtag media. So hashtag media, basically select the ID that's have media in it. And here we can say text align. And then explanation. So basically that paragraph right there. What we're going to do is font size 20 pixel and then text align. All right, so I'm going to put the source code again, just in case somebody asked me for code and it didn't respond promptly. So here's a source code, as you can see. It's not hosted on Replit because as our code getting bigger and bigger, Replit is not really a way. Replit is a better way for collaboration and then like a short-time storage. But if you really want to store your code, Replit is not that a good choice. And then in the final week of the course, we're actually going to introduce you to Git and GitHub, how you can use Git for version control and store your code online. But that's, and I host the APOD in here. So if you want to take a look at the source code, you can. Anyway, let's now go ahead and start to styling our, add some JavaScript into it. See APOD here, script.js. All right. So first, we'll go ahead and define, we're actually going to define a function. We're going to define a function. Let's see, what's the most important one? Yeah, let's go ahead and define a function. So here we can say function check today. So basically it's going to get the information. It's not exactly check today, but just name that. And then it's going to take a date. So basically what's going to happen is it's going to go ahead and get the media for that given date. And then here, what we could say is we can use the fetch that we previously defined. Let's see here. And then say command K. And then you can see we said fetch base URL and then response.json. And then let me do this one. So we define these at the top. And then here we're actually going to provide, we're actually going to use something different, the base URL. So in here, actually going to say plus question mark. Question mark is a query parameter. It's basically additional information we can specify to the server. And then the server will be able to understand, okay, so you want specifically this information. And in here, actually going to specify, see, Replit is not loading again for some reason. All right, let's just give it a sec. Probably going to switch to some other cloud editor, I think, but probably not because Replit is pretty like full-fledged. We can do anything we want with it, but sometimes it's really slow. All right, so here you can see got fetch, doesn't, data error, this thing we talked about before the break. And then here, and then in the data, where we're going to say is actually we're going to say something like this. If data bracket media type equals to undefined. And so we can use double ampersand to represent and, I mean or actually. Or so we can use double vertical bar and then right under delete or backspace. And then here we can say something like data bracket code is 400. So basically this is HTML status code. Just like HTML requests, we also have status code. And sometimes, and then if it's 400, that means some error occurred. And then it's probably because of us, so not the server. Because of the server error, it's going to return 500. If it's all success, usually some 200 or 300, stuff like that. And then probably you guys know like 404. Oh my God, just keep loading so much. And then 404, not found. 400, some errors. 403, forbidden. 405, message not allowed. You're supposed to using post by using get or vice versa. Something like that. That's called status code. Basically, it's a way to like developer know like, is there anything wrong with it? If so, what's wrong with it? All right. All right, so in here we're going to say we're going to say equals to 400. And in here, what we're going to say is we're actually going to say something like this: the document.query selector. Basically, what's happening here is we're selecting. You recall from last time, we're basically selecting an HTML element. So you can say query selector. Sometimes I cannot even understand my code I've written, but it's fine. Inner HTML equals to, so basically we're changing the HTML in that HTML element. So in here we can say something like this. Basically, if there's an error occurred or you enter wrong date, you either change the limit, and then so it doesn't work anymore. That's what we're going to say is .inner HTML. Here we can just say image source is we're going to put image source here. This is the actually let me just copy this whole tag. This is basically the NASA's like default picture if it doesn't exist. So here is the image source. If any of you wondered, here it is. So basically gonna show the default picture if it doesn't exist. If there's any error has occurred. And then what we're going to also say is we're going to in document query selector bracket, oops, bracket, let's see, date. Here we're going to say inner text equals, we'll just say 404. We'll just say 404, despite it's not really 404. It's not found, it's an error occurred. But we're just going to say 404 here. And then so we also have explanation. So in here, document.query selector, explanation, inner text. So unlike inner HTML, inner text is basically a way to just modify the text, but not the HTML itself. HTML itself. I'm gonna get 404 here. All right. So, but otherwise, so we're gonna put an else here. So otherwise, if we don't get an error, that means all the data is normal and then is expected. What we can say now is first we need to know what kind of data it is, what kind of a media type it is. So here, we can say if data bracket media type equals to image. So if it is image, then what we want to say is document query selector hashtag, and then we can add let's see. So in here we're gonna say media, and then here we're actually gonna add a inner HTML because we're going to add an image within this media. Then so here we just want to say we're actually going to use something different. We're going to use this backtick. So right above tab, you should press this backtick. Basically, what this does is this allows us actually use JavaScript code within a string. This is still a string, but a different kind of string. So we can actually use JavaScript code within this. And then here, all right, bye, Kessler. Bye. See you in next week. And then here we can say, let's see. So in here, we could say image source equals to $. And then the reason we stop, then we can use curly braces. And then inside of this inside of the curly braces, we can start to type some JavaScript expression. Okay, I will in just a little bit for sending the code. Let me finish this .inner HTML really quick. So in here we can say we can go ahead and add. Let's see. So we're gonna say data bracket URL. Data bracket URL. So that's the URL. Basically, this is the URL that we see a little bit before, the image URL that we can add to. And then now let's go close. Let's go ahead and add this to close this tab. All right. So now what we're going to do is, it turns out that we actually have a different kind of media type as well, as I just called before. It's called video. So if we say data bracket media type equals to video, it's usually a YouTube video, which I'm going to assume it's a YouTube video. And then if it is a YouTube video, what we want to do is this. So we actually want to add an iframe within this. What is iframe is? Iframe is basically how could you basically embed? How could you basically embed other web page within your web page? This is like how you can do it, especially for YouTube video. And then here we can say document.query selector. Whoops. And here we can say hashtag media dot inner HTML. This. All right. So basically, we get so if it's not image, then we want to go ahead and add all this iframe property because that's what YouTube want us to do, and then we can just change the URL to the video. All right. All right. So now we're gonna do a little bit with date, and then we're gonna talk about date really briefly. So I'm going to use our JavaScript console here really quick. So there is a way to actually get date. So unlike other programming language, which are usually server-side programming language, which we're going to take a look actually on Monday, we're actually going to take a look at Python, and briefly SQL. So in here, you can see, so how can we go ahead and create date? Because I want to get a date for today. So it turns out it's pretty easy. We can just say var today equals new date. Basically, oops. Basically, this just initialize a new date object. and then this is going to be today. So right when I go ahead, hit enter on this expression, a new date object has been initialized. And then in here, what I can do is, so now what I will do is actually, let's go ahead and take a look at this date. So if I say console.log date, you can see this is a date format. And then it said 2020, July 23, and then this is the time. Of course, this is not the time zone that I mean Pacific. So it's almost 5:10 in my time zone, but it should be UTC time zone because that's where usually the server is running. And then, but if you try to run this in the JavaScript console, in your native browser JavaScript console, you should see your date and your time get printed out here. All right, and then, so now we'll go ahead and mess with date a little bit as well, because as you recall in the index.html, we actually want to display the date because we want to say this apod is for this, but if the user choose today's apod, you can see this apod is for today. So we want to do something like that. That's what we want to mess with date. And then let me go ahead and send all the code. I'm not sure, can I send JavaScript? Well, I can, looks like. Styles. All right, so that's all the files that we got. All the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so does anyone have any questions so far? Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so pretty good, or we're not, but we're gonna keep going. So so now we're gonna start to mess with a little bit with date because we want to display date in our website little project, and in here we will go ahead and add following of code. So I'm gonna say something like this: var dd. So I'm just going to copy from my source code here now, and then let's see. So we're gonna define another function. All right, so in here we can say function today or something. Is it today? Yeah, today. It's basically going to return today. So it's going to return today, date, format like year, hyphen month, hyphen day. So this is a format that we want to, and this is another query selector that we can add. And then here we can just say dd or date is equal to this. So what's happening here? Well, actually, let's go ahead and create today. Var I don't know why this doesn't give me error for some reason, but let's just give day equals to new date, basically. So we're getting a new date that initialized, and then basically what we'll do is we construct a new string using this string class. And then instead of the string, you can see what should be inside of the string. What is a string, if you don't remember, is basically something like this. It's basically a series of text. And then in here, we can say date.getDate. Basically, it's a property built into date object, and it's going to return what date is it today. And then .passStart, basically what's happening is it's going to add a 0. It's going to add a 0. What if the date is like July 1st, right? If it's July 1st, what happened is it's instead of just going to go ahead return you 1, it's actually going to return you it's going to return you 0, 1. So it's exactly in this format. We must parse it in this format. So we can use it for NASA's API, because NASA's API wants us to pass in this format. And then in here, we could say something, then in here, we're gonna add months. And then months, basically, if you take a look, it's basically the same thing, but we have an add 1 here. Does anyone have any guesses when we have an add 1 here? Or we have an add 1 here? Well, it turns out that without add 1, so if I go ahead and show my console again. So you gotta show my console again. So if I say today.getDate, it's gonna show this because it's 22. And it is July, yeah, in my time, it is July 22. But if you say today.getMonths, it is 6, but it's not June. It's not June, it's July. Wait, is it June still? Yeah, it is July. What am I thinking? Okay, it is July. So it's not 6, it's supposed to be 7. But recall that program, but in JavaScript, January is actually 0. January is actually 0. So what we need to do is go ahead and add 1 there. And then another function we're going to use is get full year. So we can say today, get full year. And then you can say it's 2020. So everything is correct there. And then we can parse them into different format. So if I say something like this, you can see it returns 22. But if I just copy this to here, and then you can see it returns 0, 7 instead of just 7. So that's what they add 1 for, and the past start. Basically, just add a 0 before it, and if the number is not 2-digit. All right, so now let's go ahead and get back to our script. And then here we can say for year, let's get full year. And then now we could say day. So let's go ahead and remove this. Day. And then could return today. Should return today. So we're gonna return in this format. So if you go ahead and copy this into JavaScript console, this is a fast way to debug your program for like these tiny things. So if I go ahead and drag it here, paste it, and then if I say today, and you can see it's printed out in the correct format, 4-digit of year, 2-digit of months, and 2-digit of day, and then they're all connected by hyphen. All right, so that's pretty good. Then we can get date. All right, so now what we want to do is, so now you can see we can get today's date, specifically today's date. And then in here, we're actually going to go ahead and we're going to actually select the input elements now, the date input. So you can say document.query selector. And here we want to say hashtag date input. Set attribute. Basically, we want to set, what set attribute mean is we want to change or set a new HTML attribute. So we call HTML attribute is additional information that we can send. We can let HTML parser know, okay, want it to be more specific. For example, this H1 tag should have an ID of center text, should have a style of color is green, etc. So here we want to say max. So recall that we have min for minimum date, and the max, we also have a max date. So what should be a max date makes sense? Does anyone have any guess what should be the maximum date that they can choose? What should be the maximum date they can choose?
like 3,000. No, today,
Exactly, should be today,
or
right?
maybe a few days after.
No, I mean, it doesn't, the server don't have the content a few days after. Yeah, so it should be today, exactly. It is today, good job. So that way it should be today, all right? And then let's go ahead and finish this function. We only have about 15 minutes left. I hope we can finish it. So here we can say if date, and then let's go ahead and say here if date, actually if data date equals to today. So if it's also the JSON response is going to give to us should also contain a date. It's also contain a date, and if the date matches our date, today's date, we'll want to display message, and then we want to say document.query selector. And here we want to say hashtag date. We can say inner text. I want to say something like this APOD is for today. So we could say this APOD is for today, and then we could put today's date here, and then we can put like today, basically. Put today's date there, and then what we could do. Wait, did I return a string? Yes, I did. Okay. Then what we can do is otherwise, if it's not today's date, then we want to say this APOD. It's really just one word. This. All right. And then we also want to display explanation as well. So a little bit description of what the text is and it's for. So in here, we want to say something like document.query selector, hashtag explanation, and here I can say inner text equals to data bracket explanation. All right. So data bracket explanation, and then what is going to happen is it's going to replace the text in this explanation HTML, and then to the inner text, and the inner text to the data bracket explanation, whatever the description that is sent by the NASA's JSON, NASA server. All right, so the final thing is we still have one function to implement. Does anyone know what we still need to implement? One more function. Does anyone have an idea what function should be implemented? Let me give you a hint. It's somewhere here. It somewhere says a JavaScript function that we haven't implemented yet. Does anyone know what function should we implement? The final function. All right. Well, we're actually going to need to implement this custom APOD. As we can see, everything we do is really just within today, right? It's within today. We didn't actually do something like what happens should a user's input get clicked. So now let's go ahead and say custom APOD. So in here, we could say something like this: document. Actually, let's go ahead and define a new function. Call this custom APOD. And in here, we want to say var date equals document.query selector hashtag date input the value. And I'm going to check today's date. All right. So the final step that we need to do is when by default, you can see, no, there's not really much thing happened except this line before calling any function. So now we actually need to call a check today function. It's not really today, but we need to pass a date here. So we can go ahead and get this certain date. All right, so let's take a look. What's our finished version look like? So let's see. So let's see. I don't think there should be an error. Do you have any errors? Actually, did I have some bug or somewhere? Hope there's not a bug. Have bug script JS 50 can I reset a set attribute of no. So that means we didn't get the elements. 50 input. Oh, whoops. We need to move this JavaScript file even more down. So usually we'll put this right before the closing tag for the body. It returned 44 not found for some reason. Let's see. Why did it? I'm not sure why did it returns 44 not found. Let me double check with the source code really quick.
Can you put the CSS in chat?
All right, I will do that in just a little bit. Let me take a look. Where is this? That's really weird. I don't know what's happened here. Probably something wrong with API key, I think. Let me put the CSS in there. Something wrong with CSS, that's weird. I mean, something wrong with JavaScript. All right, there you go. So, let's see. Is that because I used the wrong API key? Let's see if I try to use demo key instead. Demo key. Let's run this again. I'm sure this doesn't say doesn't found. Yeah. I'm not sure why this said doesn't found for some reason. Oh, okay. Yeah, so we need to put a date there. So in here, what we need to do, one more thing we need to do is actually need to get a date. So plus ampersand, and then here, we're gonna go ahead and put query date equals to plus date, whatever date is given today. And then because sometimes it thinks it's July 23rd, that's why it's not yet 23rd, so they don't have the data yet. And now you can see we loaded this kind of successfully, because I'm not sure where the image is. Did I literally forgot to load the image? Okay, well, for some reason the image didn't display for some reason. Okay, well, I don't know why the image didn't work. Data. Oh, okay. Should be somewhere here. So remove that quotation mark really quick. And I hope this time, yes, indeed. And then you can see we got a calendar, got a description there. If you change it, you can see got a we got a video here. It's a YouTube video. And then, yes, so that's about it for today's class. Just a quick recap what we did. We talked about HTTP status code, HTTP request, what is an API/API key, and then what is JSON, which is just JavaScript object, but in its own markup language. And then we talk about how could you use fetch to actually get an API. And then we also use an API in real life. It's called NASA's APOD API. Let's run a picture of the day. All right, so for the last 5 minutes, I would like to do a short Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. For today's homework, I didn't create assessment on the course's website, but if you want to, you can. I would suggest you to twist the code a little bit or found external API that you can or use with. So whatever you're interested in, there are probably some API that you can use for the data. So this is some public APIs that if you wanted to use, you can take a look. This is a public API. And then, so you can see they have a lot of APIs that you can use if you want to incorporate into your own web application using JavaScript. And then this is just a recap for today. And then start with next week, what we'll talk about is we'll start to transition into back-end programming, which is programming with a server. We'll use a language called Python to do the back-end programming. All right, so that's it for today. Do you guys have any questions or comments? Your guys' homework is just using, like, I didn't create an assessment on the course's website, but you guys' homework is just try to implement a web page similar to what we did in the class by using one of the public APIs. And then I set the link at the top into the chat, github.com/public-apis/public-apis. So if you guys want to, can take a look. They have like a bunch of lists that API you can use. Choose whatever you're interested and create some mini web apps. And we'll go ahead and probably do a show and tell probably in the next week on the Monday. So if you guys want to share your there, and then my replit for this is here for this class. Whoops. So this is the API. This is the replit. You can use whatever API you want to create some sort of web app like this. And then we'll really be interested in what you guys use and create. That's like your guys' homework. I'm probably going to create a form where you can submit your task. All right, so does anyone have any other questions? Whoops, I sent it to private again. There we go.
Can you show us what you did for the
What I did?
For the Caesar cipher.
For the Caesar cipher, yeah, I don't think I did any replit. I will show this in the next time actually for real, because I had some internet issue for today. I decided to show it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't put on the replit yet. And I will send the email to you guys about Caesar cipher. It's Caesar cipher. I will send it a little bit to you guys, and after this class end or next class beginning. Hopefully my internet connection didn't have here. Show and tell about. So basically, you will try and create some of your own web app by using the API list I sent to you. So I would send this in today's source code as well. So like this is your homework, like create some web app using whatever API you want. So lots of public free APIs you want to. I send a link in the Zoom chat as well. Basically, that's what we'll try to do. All right. And yeah, so I will, yeah. And that's about it. So thanks for attending this class, and see you guys in the on Monday. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
And
What
the
will we learn on Monday?
day,
Bye.
the APOD for my birthday, and it's a puff.
Oh, what did you just say, Jeffrey? Birthday?
Yeah, for my birthday, I searched up for my APOD, like for the APOD.
Oh, okay. Is today your birthday?
No, it's just like I searched it up to see what it is.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for you guys for attending. I'm not sure. I'm not sure the recording. You have to add the admin. I'm not sure either, because this is not my recording. This is the classrooms Zoom. All right. All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.